Welcome to the Orange Hammer Podcast. My name is Corbett Storick. I've been a licensed general contractor for 8+ years, specializing in new construction, renovation, furniture building. I'm the son of an architect and an interior designer, and I've been surrounded in this industry since birth, watching all aspects from concept, design, build, punch list, and of course, all the problems that come up in between. In my time in Durham, North Carolina, I've noticed a significant gap in knowledge between homeowners who need work and the people who do the work. On this podcast, I hope to break down the process of homeownership from the perspective of both the homeowner and the contractor in an effort to help raise the knowledge of homeowners about their homes and the construction/renovation process. I hope you enjoy. If you're enjoying the Orange Hammer Podcast, or if you have a topic that you want covered, or have recently done a project, please contact the Orange Hammer Podcast. The Orange Hammer Podcast is on Instagram and Facebook. Please like and subscribe, share on whatever platform you're enjoying your podcast on. Also, check out our YouTube channel, The Orange Hammer. The Orange Hammer Podcast is proud to be brought to you by CRS Contracting LLC for all your construction and handyman needs, new buildings to renovations, furniture building, EV charger install, or even a TV mounted. You can call me, Corbett Storick. It'd be my pleasure to help you. You can find me on Instagram at CRS Contracting. WSDG, the Walter Storick Design Group, specialists in architectural and acoustical consulting. Check out WSDG.com. And Taylor Bragg, for all your artistic needs in all mediums. You can find her on Instagram at brag_about_art. That's brag, BRGG, with 2 G's. She's the fantastic artist behind the Orange Hammer logo, and she did my fantastic table painting of my podcasting table. My guest today is Kevin Stewman. He's actually my closing attorney from Tri-City Lawyers. Is that correct?
You have it. That's right.
And we've got, let's see, what can we say about Kev? Avid motorcycle enthusiast, baseball fan. Let's stop there.
Stop there or start there?
Either, both. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Corp. Hope you are.
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know this is probably the most random thing I've probably called you about, because it's usually about needing your lawyer services.
Yes, some of that's been random too, but yes, this was.
Yeah, I guess some of that has been a little random. So I guess let's just dive right in. So, a lot of people don't even know that when you buy a house, there is an entire process after you've said yes and done some inspections and stuff like that, that you have to do an entire thing called closing. And that requires a closing attorney, such as yourself. So, in not so many or as many as you'd like, what is, the closing process in the real estate world like?
That's a deep well question. The closing process begins, of course, when you find that you need a home or you're looking for an investment, and you have your agent, like Stacy Sloan. I know you spoke with Stacy a while back, and
yeah, she's been a guest. She's a friend of the podcast. She's actually how we got introduced, and we thank her for that very, very much.
And that's how the process starts. You have that agent, and they find the property for you, and you, as you said, you enter into a contract, and at that point, you start believing that you're buying bedrooms and baths and such things. In reality, the way I look at it is you're buying the title to that property, and the title is the most important thing that a closing attorney has to do, is certify that you are actually getting what you think you are getting, which, again, you look at it as bathrooms and baths and dining rooms and living rooms and nice whatever. I know that if you do not have good title, what you are getting is a problem. So the attorney's job with closing actually begins with me taking a look at that property, doing a deep dive into the status of that title, making sure that there are no liens against the property that can't be satisfied at the closing, making sure there are no federal or state tax liens on it. Those are super liens. They have the ability to trump even existing mortgages, making sure that the parties are not the seller is not a party to a lawsuit or have any liens to any contractors that would in some way impair the ability for you to have the type of title that you're looking to get. The closing itself at the end is merely the production where we celebrate basically the closing. That's probably a bit melodramatic because you're dealing most of the time with the lender's documents, which is I won't get into talking about lenders today unless you ask me because I want this to be a happy time.
Yeah, we'll save lenders. I have a few lined up as a separate episode, so we'll deal into that awfulness when we bring them on, and hopefully they can put a positive spin on it. But so for those who might not know the terminology, a lien is kind of a fancy way of saying money due or owed, like a loan.
Correct.
Yeah.
A bank mortgage, a bank deed of trust, a bank mortgage, that is a lien. But if you also owe money to the U.S. government and don't pay those taxes, and they file a lien against you, that lien will also apply to property that you own.
Yeah, and you also mentioned contractors such as myself. If for some reason we did not get paid, or there is some sort of lawsuit or investigation pending, that would also show up on your zone as far as a lien against the property.
Correct. Our search would turn up if there have been any potential lien claimants have filed, or if there's actually been a filing at the clerk of court with respect to a monetary claim of lien. Correct.
Gotcha. Do you have any idea why this kind of information isn't like the first thing that is known or seen when you're going to look at a house? Like, I'm assuming the answer is whatever lawmaker just didn't make it that way, but I just am so confused. Like, why isn't the very first thing on the MLS listing when you look at a property for sale the liens, so that you can be like, oh, okay, well, we now know we need to deal with that, or there aren't any?
Well, that's a fantastic question, and I've never been asked that one before, so that's not in the realm of random. That's a very good question. The reason is that is a fluid status. You can have liens on today and off tomorrow for perfectly legitimate reasons. A deed of trust that's been paid and is being canceled, but hasn't been canceled yet. So it might still show on the public record, but it has been paid.
Okay.
Claims of lien, or let's use the other one, the potential lien claimant. Under NC lien, you can file as potential lien claimant before you even do any work. You go out to the box. There'll be a box out there, and it will have a what's that code? Whatever it is, the thing. When you go to a restaurant, and you want to snap the little code and see the
little
menu,
like the
QR code. There
yeah,
you go. Yeah,
gotcha.
I was trying to think of QR code. And as a potential lien claimant, if you're going to go do work on a property, you just snap that code in. You are immediately entered as a potential lien claimant. That information is available to me, and I will find that, which means then I have to contact those potential lien claimants and get releases. So those things are available, but the vast majority of folks are not going to look at NC lien, and for that to be a part of someone who's going to be putting up on the MLS, for them to dabble in something that is a title issue that only a title attorney can certify to and search and be able to give an opinion on title, it's probably a little optimistic that they would be able to create that record and to be somewhat accurate. I mean, if you're going to have the responsibility in that party's hands, in that party's responsibility box to put that information together, I think there's, and I'm not throwing off on agents or realtors, but I think it would be a very tall task to assume that they would be able to gather the data and it would be accurate. So at the risk of having something that's completely inaccurate and perhaps casts more of a pall upon the title than it should be, it's probably best to have a what is required under North Carolina law, which is a North Carolina licensed attorney to be able to certify the title. And only in North Carolina, there's a lot of things that settlement shops in other states can do that is not allowed in North Carolina. North Carolina, we are a attorney-led closing state.
Okay.
And that puts the onus on us and the responsibility on us to make sure that the title is clear when we go to close. And lenders rely on that, and the borrowers and the buyers rely on us to make sure that's correct. So that's in our bailiwick. That's what I'm responsible to do, to make sure that title is what the buyer thinks it's going to be.
So bar exam in another state is not enough. It has to be NC.
Yeah.
So you can't come in here and as an investor and bring your own attorney from, I don't know, Rhode Island. I'm just going to make it up. You have to find an NC local attorney.
You do.
Gotcha.
I'm licensed in New York and North Carolina, and those are the only two states that I can practice law in. I can't even draft documents in another state. It takes a North Carolina attorney to draft deeds in this state. It takes
Gotcha.
a lender can draft the deed of trust, but the actual conveyance is by a deed, and that has to be by a North Carolina attorney. And I'll go ahead and make this statement here. I wanted to bring this one up today when you had mentioned and asked about this podcast, and that is the unauthorized practice of law. I wish the bar, North Carolina State Bar, would be a little more zealous in protecting the rights of attorneys to do this work. By statute, we're the only attorneys that can do it, but it takes an affirmative stance on behalf of the bar to police this and to protect the rights of the borrowers and the buyers of North Carolina, to make sure that it is a North Carolina attorney that's actually certifying the title. North Carolina is an attorney-led state. That's rare. There's probably less than 10 states that are attorney-led. The majority of them are settlement shop states, and New York is one of those. And I'm licensed in New York. And 30 years ago, when I was doing this in New York, I made almost twice as much as I make now, and was not responsible for the title search. I wasn't responsible for the departmental searches. I wasn't responsible for much, except showing up with the client and fighting with one of the other attorneys in the room.
The term that you just used was settlement shop.
Settlement shop, yeah. A title company.
A title company. Okay, so they're not lawyers. That's a specific niche that is the title. So an NC, that just doesn't exist because you need an NC lawyer. Oh, there's a
It
giggle.
should not exist in North Carolina. There's a lot of settlement shops in other states that have effectively done closings in North Carolina. It's supposed to be a North Carolina attorney, but what they'll do is they will loosely associate themselves with the North Carolina attorney. They will do closings here and use that attorney's name on final title opinions, on HUD statements, on closing disclosures. It is 100% the unauthorized practice of law, but the bar is aware of it. I mean, in our firm, John and I, we are.
So it's a very gray area that they're sneaking by, it sounds like to me.
It's a total black area that they're going gray in, and waiting for someone to push the issue on the enforcement of the statutes that we have in place. And as I've said, the bar is not nearly zealous enough, in my opinion, to keep out the unauthorized practice of law. So that's a sore spot with us, because we understand. John and I've looked. He's my partner, John Booker. I don't know if you've met John, but
I actually haven't had the pleasure. Unfortunately, I mean, all these years we made appointments and we see you.
Yeah, well, it's your benefit that you haven't had to deal with John, because he's an acquired taste, but he's a great attorney. But we both believe that it's the client that should always be taken care of first and foremost, first and last, and everything else is just you spackle it in where you can. Unfortunately, a lot of the attorneys in the state that do real estate closings, and they don't have the problem we have with the unauthorized practice of law, because they don't see it as a diminishing of the use of the attorney. They don't see it as a diminishing of the true services of an attorney, because they run their shops as a mill. They run it as a mill. They do the 40 closings a week, 45 closings a week. And that's fine if they want to, if that's how they want to practice. If they want to close in 20 minutes and none of their buyers, none of their borrowers actually want to have anything explained to them, I have a hard time believing that. But if that's the way they want to run their office, that's up to them. But John and I,
the average buyer wouldn't know what should be explained to them, because they've never done this before. And if they have, maybe they went through somebody like that. And I've done this a lot, and those contracts are still long and confusing to me. So I got to say, to play the devil's advocate, which I got to say is literally the point of this podcast in this regard, not every homeowner, and we're trying to educate homeowners here, knows that a closing should take more than 20 minutes. And there are maybe 10, 15 things that you could maybe outline that they should be expecting to go over that have maybe been glanced over in a previous closing that took 15 minutes by one of these people that we're not very fond of.
That's a fantastic rendition of what I actually believe to be the case. First off, I mean, going over the closing disclosure. The old days, we called it a HUD. You remember the HUD?
Yep.
The Housing Urban Development Statement. Now it's called a closing disclosure. It's 4 or 5 pages, and there's a wealth of information in there. And if you do that right, and you go line to line and explain, this is what your loan is costing you. These are the fees that you have paid. This is my fee. This is the title premium for the title insurance. Oh, what is title insurance? Has anyone ever explained it to you? No. Huh. Okay, well, let me explain to you what title insurance is, what it covers, what it doesn't cover. Why should you have it? Why is the lender's policy considered mandatory? Your policy is considered optional. Huh, why is that? Why is your policy cheaper than their policy? These kinds of questions beg to be asked. And you're right. The borrower, the person buying the home, the borrower from the bank, they have no idea what to ask because it's never been explained to them in a way that they have enough information to know what they know and know what they don't know.
Yeah, I mean, probably until 2 weeks before that moment when their realtor called them and said, good news, all the inspections are fine, we close in 2 weeks. They didn't even really know what a closing was like unless they called, one of their parents or one of their friends who was like, oh yeah, you're going to go see your lawyer and do this. And so again, not everybody know. The first time that I went to your office to buy $23,000 worth of Guthrie Avenue that we no longer own, I had no idea what a closing was like. I was a child in the scheme of the real life, in the real world, and I had no idea. And we were buying a house without inspections, without due diligence, without a lot of the stuff that you would normally have for a house that you were not going to immediately gut. So we actually got to skip a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. And it was still, my brother and I were there for, and this is not a complaint, we were still there for 40 minutes going over everything because I had never done that before. And my brother had done that once when he was in college with, let's be honest, 3 parents to help him. So it was not, we were on our own. Like, what's going on? We never bought a project house before. So, for somebody, and we're in the industry. So just kind of furthering my point that like the average homeowner, the average software engineer who met an adorable cocktail waitress and they start a family, they have no idea what to expect. They've seen, HDTV and the closing is a 4-second flash of a cut edit of the screen. And they don't even introduce the lawyer. Lawyers are important. Unfortunately, a lot of times you need other types of lawyers, usually for bad times in your life. But lawyers in general, this is very important stuff, and it gets glanced over.
Yeah, the reason for that, I believe, is historically, I think attorneys in a lot of the areas of practice, they operate under 2 assumptions. One, it's the subject matter is above their client and they won't be able to understand it even if it's explained, which is an incredibly arrogant approach. Or 2, that the client really doesn't care.
Which could be the case. In either one of those could be true at some percentage, but no way are either one of them 100% true.
How would the attorney know unless they ask the questions to figure out exactly what the client wanted? Now, I will be candid with you, and you probably know this. I err on the side of explaining maybe more than some clients want, and I try to read the client because I never want a client to leave not educated. I don't ever want a client to leave wondering what just happened. What are the implications of what I just did? Because I would not want to be that client.
Yeah, buying a house is usually a tremendous amount of money and an incredible life event for the people doing it. So it just makes sense that people like you and like Stacy, who, again, is the reason we even know each other, they care. It might be a living, but they still care.
Well, I think that the proof of how much the clients do care for that is the unbelievable loyalty that I have seen from my clients. And I'm not going to, sprain my arm, pat myself on the back, but if you treat a client the way that you want to be treated and give them the opportunity to learn what it is that you do and give them that assurance, that peace of mind, hey, he's not perfect. Okay, I'm not perfect. So could I miss something?
There is nobody perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
But I have busted the guts that I have to try to make sure that I'm not going to miss it for you. And I see clients, I meet clients, and I love it. They may today be with one agent and next week be with another agent on another property. And I get this. The agent will call and say, well, I picked up this client. They've closed with you before. I suggested they go to my attorney, and they just said flat no. We're not going to your attorney. We're going to go here. And as he told me in the closing, as he tells every client, you always have the right to pick your own attorney. I appreciate agents, and I appreciate the ones that are extremely loyal to me, but they need to let the client know. If you have an attorney you want to use, it is your right. It's your prerogative. Please do not ever let anyone force you to use an attorney that you don't want to use. You don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, you are on my podcast, so you could probably defer, but like, I'm not finding another attorney until you retire. And then I'll probably ask if you have a successor. But
Well, well, I've got kids and a wife, so my retirement day is way into the future. So
Cool.
we're good for a while.
Okay, then let's keep buying homes. Yeah. So a little about you. You mentioned you practice law in NC and New York. Are you from New York originally?
No, I'm from Western North Carolina.
Okay.
I went to school at UNC and couldn't decide after my undergrad as a business major what I wanted to do. So I took a job in banking and moved to Rocky Mount, which is on the list of exciting cities on the planet.
Rocky Mount's not on that list.
It's not on that list.
Yeah. Rocky Mount, North Carolina? No, it's not on that list.
Yeah, it's truly not. So
I have a very good friend whose girlfriend is from there, and that's literally only I've heard of the name over and over and over again because they're like, "Yeah, we're going to Rocky Mount this weekend," and I'm not joking. For 5+ years, I thought it was Rocky Mountain, and they were just like bringing on the accent. They're like, "We're going to Rocky Mount," and I was like, "Okay, have fun at Rocky Mountain." And they were like, "Where's Rocky Mount? We're going to Rocky Mount. The word stops." I was like, I feel dumb because I never saw it written out.
Well, you can feel okay about it because you've missed very little by not going to Rocky Mount. I had the Nautilus to work out at and a basketball court to play on. So I worked in banking for those, I guess, 5 years. Ultimately, I worked about 5 years and ended up managing a branch of the old People's Bank in Raleigh.
What'd you get a degree in finance?
It was a BS in business administration.
Okay, so you got it. So that allows you to do almost anything. So you end up doing banking,
right,
in Rocky Mount. Okay, so you said 4 or 5 years you were in managing banking.
Yeah, and
Gotcha.
then I went back to law school because I was working for a agricultural bank in the technology capital of the Southeast and making agricultural loans wasn't really a thing on Highway 70, Glenwood Avenue. So most of the loan applications I took back got rejected. So I finally burnt out on that and decided I could either be an honest man and get a job and doing something else or waste some more time and go back to law school. So I decided to go back to law school and
Gotcha. Okay.
figure out after 3 more years what I want to do when I grow up. And so I did that and then moved to New York. Moved to New York and sat the bar up there after 3 years of working in banking. Went to New York and went back to banking for 3 years.
Oh, so where'd you go to law school?
UNC.
So you go back 3 years UNC, and then you go back. Then not back. Then you go up to New York, but go back into banking after law school. You don't take the NC bar yet.
No.
Okay, so you go to New York, you take the NY bar, and you start practicing up there.
Yeah, well, I worked in banking for 3 years in New York and sat the New York bar cold, and then started practicing law in New York. So I test well. So I passed the bar in New York and got a job at a firm out on Long Island, a small general practice firm.
The way you just drop, I sat the bar cold, like it's no big deal.
No, it's not a measure of intelligence. Trust me, it's not a measure of intelligence.
What?
If you test well, you can game these things. So, no, it's not that's not a braggadocio comment. I test well. So, but then I got a job for a small firm and. The young guys, the guy on the bottom of the totem pole, I did everything. I was in landlord-tenant court in Nassau County, Suffolk County, and 60 Center Street, Manhattan at 2 p.m. doing a civil trial for $300,000 or $400,000. So it was a great experience for 5 years, 6 years, and then I was able to waive into North Carolina. Didn't have to take another bar. Didn't want to spend the money for it. So
how does that work? Do some states just talk, or is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a compact. Individual states have this agreement, this compact with other states. And New York and North Carolina have one.
But only those two talk to each other?
No. There's a lot more. I mean, I could waive in with my numbers of years of practice in both these jurisdictions to quite a few states. I don't know how many.
Okay. You just don't because you don't need to.
I don't want to. I don't want to practice in any other state.
Because like my GC license is randomly allowed in 12 or 15 states that I can't remember off the top of my head. The one I do remember is Atlanta or Georgia because I have a sister in Atlanta, and I'm like, yes, buy a house. A contractor. I can legally pull licenses in your state. Like we can make it happen. Of course, through another whole conversation that just hasn't happened yet, but. Hopefully we'll get her on the podcast soon enough.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It's like a random 12 states
that just like if you're licensed in NC, there's, I think the word is reciprocity or reciprocity.
Reciprocity, yeah, exactly.
And it's a very random list of states. I don't know why, like they're picked that. Yeah, I don't know. And then there's another class of license that it didn't do at the time that just is all 50 states. And I don't know how that's even possible because like the crazy different codes from like a California earthquake code versus the coast of North Carolina code versus the middle of, Kansas. There's no way the way you build is the same. So, and the codes aren't the same. So I don't know how the licenses could work in all 50 states, but it's irrelevant.
Well, I think that's pretty fascinating. I think perhaps the point of the licensure is that you're a competent builder and you would be able to adjust to whatever market that you're in with whatever the complexities of that market are. I mean, that would, if that's the intent, I would think that would be accurate as long as you can call out the ne'er-do-wells at the very beginning of the process.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that is one way of looking at it. The way I look at it is like the code is very specific, even from town to town. Like right here in Durham versus a future house I'm going to do in Orange County. I mean, it's a 20-minute drive. There's different codes. And it's like, okay, so I just don't know how somebody could keep up with all the codes to be able to even call somebody out. But again, this is, I don't build houses I build houses in one state, so I don't worry about it. But it was a testing option that I just chose not to do. I'm having trouble remembering, but it was like a larger builder. And by larger, I mean like bigger structures, like, parking garages and stuff like that. But once again, like, I guess what you're saying does make sense. The more I say it is like, you would be not somebody pouring that concrete. So you wouldn't need to know. You need to hire the local concrete guy, and his whole life job is to know his local codes. So you could go either direction. You continue to play the devil's advocate. But we'll see if I can convince my sister to buy a house. I know she wants to, but she's worried about doing the work in the house. I'm like, well, this is what I do. We could get it done for you.
So would you have the same markup?
No, not at all. Are you kidding?
No, for family, it's always higher, right?
For family, it would probably be like, well, you know what? Different family gets different markup, if we're being honest. Alyssa would get, like room and board and probably, I don't know, half maybe what I would charge a regular person. Yeah, it depends. Yeah, I get on it. To be completely honest, it would depend on what she would need me to do, because there's some stuff I couldn't even discount her realistically, because if she needs like a legitimate handful of subcontractors to do a legitimate, like I can't tell them to discount because they got to drive to Atlanta. So yeah, but my 20% on top for GC services, we'd work something out. I'd make her fly me to somewhere for a vacation. We call it even. It would work out for everybody. It'd be a third the price, and I'd get to go somewhere cool. I guess you don't do a lot of bartering for services in the lawyer world. You just send a bill.
No comment.
No comment. Okay. The lawyer in you says we're not going to put anything incriminating on the air, and I respect it.
I do want to circle back at one point. One of the things that, you'd mentioned, the things that the client is not aware to ask for, and we were talking about the closing disclosure. The other thing that I would love to talk about for a moment is a concept called tacking.
Yeah, jump into it. What is tacking? I don't know that word.
Yeah, as I said, the most important thing about a property that you buy is the title.
Yeah.
And when you write title and you get a title insurance policy from one of these large companies that insure the title, and basically what title insurance is, it says you buy this property, you get title insurance on it, and as long as whatever boo-boo pops up, whatever the attorney missed, whatever pops, if there's a claim of lien that's not been filed yet and it gets filed within the filing period, if there's a problem, that title insurance says you're not going to be out any money. So it doesn't cover issues that a survey would show. If there's like overhead power lines or manhole, there's manhole covers there, and you realize that there's underground pipes or utility lines or whatever.
So how long does that title insurance usually last?
Till you die. If you live on the property, forever. If you stay on the property, that title policy will stay on there forever with respect to that, to the condition of title as the day of you bought it.
So maybe
title insurance looks backward. It does not go forward.
Okay, so maybe I didn't quite understand it, and I'd like to recap for a second. So obviously, like buying a car, buying a home, you get a title. It's a cute piece of paper. The house or the car, actually not worth anything. It's the piece of paper. So you're looking out as the title closing attorney to make sure that there are no liens and everything on that title is perfect. And what you're saying is no human is perfect. So there could be something you miss, and title insurance is the insurance. Obviously, everybody knows what insurance is, to make sure that if you did miss something and there's a lien discovered, that it's good. You're not out any money. But why does that go on forever? Aren't liens, don't they eventually die out? I mean, you're telling me 35 years after I buy a house, the son of a contractor could find a bill that wasn't paid by my dad or whatever, or like that's real?
Okay, that's a great question. So let me say again, title insurance looks backwards. So going forward, you can do all kinds of things to your property and screw it up. You can get liens against you, tax liens. Looking back, the title insurance will cover you for items that should have been disclosed and were not disclosed, and therefore were not insured over. Though, like liens, like bank loans, those can be effective for a period up to 30 years if the loan is for 30 years, plus an enforcement period which can be up to 15 years after its maturity. So let's say that you, in 1975, you got, well, that one would be expired. Let's say 1985, you bought a property, 1985. You got a 30-year mortgage on it. That mortgage would have expired in 2015. We're not 15 years past 2015. So if that deed of trust was not canceled, it's conceivable that there is a sum of money out there that hasn't been paid that could constitute a lien against that property.
And for the record, this is irrelevant if you have a mortgage or you bought the house in cash. The title's the title, and you need title insurance.
That's correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Great clarification. I know it sounds far-fetched. Let me give you one.
It sounds freaking insane that like 30 years ago a carpenter didn't get paid. I want that carpenter to get paid. Let's be clear. I'm the carpenter a lot of the times, but just that 30 years. A whole owner before me, and that it's still a lien on the house that I would have to be liable for. I mean, that's just like,
well, the 30 years is for that document, which has a 30-year maturity. A non-paid bill on a theory of contract might be 3 or 5 years. So that period could be shorter. But I want to tell you the value of title insurance. I was doing a search, two searches, real quick, two searches. One, I found a deed of trust from a local bank that was, I think, in 2007, and it had never been canceled. This was 3 or 4 owners later, and every title attorney that had done this search had tacked, as I was going to tell you about tacking, had tacked to a previous title policy, which just says, you're going to take that existing title policy and save your client some money by tacking to it. Tacking to it says the title insurance company that has that policy, or any title company, they all honor the previous policy. They say, we'll allow you to tack to that. Your search only has to go back to that date. So if I'm closing a property today that sold in 2019, I only have to go back to 2019. I only have to search back till 2019, can tack to that policy, and you have coverage.
Who's agreeing to the tack?
Every borrower that wants to get a reissue on it is okay with the concept of tacking. The subtle difference, the borrower should be happy with tacking because you're not opening yourself up to liability. But as an attorney, he wants to make sure that title is actually clean. I'm going to search for my 30-year period. I'm going to search that 30-year period.
So you don't care about tacking because you want to make sure it's clean.
That's
100%.
Correct. But I will tack to that policy. I won't rely on it for the search period. I will search the 30 years and make sure I believe title is clean. But I will tack to that policy because that gets my borrower the best reissue rate. It'll save them money.
So let's live in a hypothetical where the tacking is 2020 and there was a problem in 2015. So let's
Perfect.
Just make it up. So
no, you don't have to.
What do you do?
This is where I was going.
Oh, okay, cool.
So 2007, there was this lien 4 owners later, 3 or 4 owners later, everybody had been tagging the previous one. I go back and look, and I'm like, okay, this 2007 deed of trust hasn't been canceled. So I contact the lender. Is this canceled? Well, you're not the borrower. We can't talk to you. And that's fine. But if you're owed money, wouldn't you want to tell me? Because I'm telling you this property is being sold, and I would like to know, bank that no longer exists, SunTrust, I'm sorry, if this loan has been paid or not. They're not the borrower, so I can say their name. After haranguing 2 or 3 people, I get the answer back, no, it's not paid. So here's a deed of trust that was for, I don't know, $400,000 or $500,000 that still had an active amount on it, and title insurance 3 or 4 times had been insured over, which means the title company would be responsible for it. But as I told the buyer, yes, we could close this right now without getting a release from SunTrust or Truist now. But if you go find a buyer for your property, you want to sell it, and the market's never, it's not always going to be as nice as it was a year ago. So let's say that it ceases to be a complete seller's market and it comes back to being a balanced market, or heaven forbid for you sellers, a buyer's market. And the attorney for that buyer does what I do. Well, I understand there's a policy here in 2021 or 2022. Let me do a 30-year search and see what I see. Oh my God, here's the deed of trust. It's not canceled. Let me call.
Real quick, for honestly listeners and myself, let's be really clear. Remind us what a deed of trust is.
Yeah, the deed of trust is the document you sign in the lawyer's office that says if you don't pay the note to the bank, they will use that deed of trust to start a foreclosure proceeding, which is, of course, a terrible, nasty thing because they take your property back.
So when whoever had that sold the house, they just never paid the bank? They just took the money and run, basically? Or we don't know what happened to them, but they didn't pay the bank. We know that
bank
much.
was not paid.
And then somehow the bank didn't deal with it then for whatever reason.
Bank slept for 15 years.
And then it's bought and sold several times.
Correct.
And only because you discovered it, it's even being discussed.
That's correct.
And the bank didn't want to tell you when you called them, despite the fact that the money was due to them.
Confidentiality issues, I understand.
I understand confidentiality, I guess, but at the same time, it wasn't like you were trying to get like blood type. You were trying to be like, who owes me money? Who owes you money?
Correct.
And okay,
and I wanted to clear it for the client, and so the client said, we're going to trust what you want to do. I said, I want a release from Truist. We can close it if they'll file a release, and they did. They filed a release. They didn't forgive the note. They went back against this other person, 3 or 4 owners ago, and I guess they're trying to collect it now.
Right, they're trying to collect from the person, but as far as the house, they released the property. Okay. So that just is paperwork.
Yes, and that was paperwork, but without the paperwork, they may have lost a buyer if they went to sell, if the closing attorney did what I did. The other one was even more egregious, believe it or not. This was from 2003. This was another one I was doing this year. And there were a couple of owners later as well. The VA had sold this property back in 2003, and the notary stamp was beautiful. The notary signed it wonderfully. The VA stamp was on it, but no one signed it for the VA. The deed wasn't signed. It was recorded, a recorded deed.
Just clerical error, probably. Like this isn't malicious.
No, it's not malicious, but I called the title company that was insuring it, and I said, in my opinion, I can't pass on title. I can't pass on whether or not something is insurable or marketable. That's a title company. But I said, in my opinion, this is a total title failure. Do you agree that this is a total title failure? And the comment from the title underwriter was, yes, we agree it's a total title failure, but we'll insure over it. I'm like, well, what do you mean you'll insure over it?
Wait a minute. Those are contradictory statements.
They will insure it. The property is insurable, but is it marketable? Again, it's about insurability versus marketability. The title company doesn't really care. They'll insure over it, but I don't want my buyer to ever lose my buyer who someday is going to be a seller for that property. I don't want them to have to deal with a buyer that they lose, or heaven forbid that one of these people comes back and attempts to enforce that lien against them. Yes, title insurance can be thrown in there, but who wants to deal with the legal aspects and have to deal with the title underwriter to defend them on this matter? Let's clean it up.
Yeah, who wants the potential of a headache? Why you're already getting paid to be the closing attorney. That just goes to show why somebody like you is so much more valuable over that company that's doing 20-minute closings and probably doesn't care about this. So you're good to close, we're good to close. Okay, great. They don't care.
I do believe that, and I think it's pretty clear the way I talk about it, how much I care and feel about it. But I'm not going to. If folks are fine with that, and I've said this to folks. I said, look, I'm not going to charge like I'm Macy's, but I'm also not going to act like I'm Kmart. I do think that a client has a right to excellent representation, and that means in North Carolina real estate transactions that the attorney has actually done a really good look at that title. And if I don't pull my own title, which I do half the time, my abstract will pull that title. I will look at every page. I will turn over every page, and I will look at the deed. I'll look at the signature lines. I will look at, and if I'm concerned about something and it don't feel right, I'll find where that person sold another property and compare signatures, because I just want to do everything I can to make sure that my clients are protected at the end of the day. That's in our model, the model that Tri-City has, the model we have. I understand it's not for everybody. I understand that some clients don't care. And I get that. They're like, I'm insured. I really don't care. And the 1 in 100 chance you're talking about could happen. I'm willing to roll the dice on that. I don't want to be in your office for an hour having you explain this to me. And if someone feels that way, I want them to find the attorney that will handle their transaction the way they want it handled, but it wouldn't be me.
Yeah, I gotcha. So full circle, tacking seems to be not even a great thing, and
it is for the premium. It is for the premium.
Oh, okay. So there is a benefit. I guess I missed the part of there even being a benefit.
Yes.
Okay, so you lock in that sweet premium, but you're ignoring this because you want to make sure it's fully clean past the 30 years.
The tacking does two things. One, you can shorten your search period, but you can use it to get a lower reissue rate. I will always use it for one of those two things, but not the other one.
Okay. Roger. Okay. That's a really good point. Yeah, I had no idea what tacking was. So some two real life examples that we need to talk about because they really happened. One, I was going to buy that land, that 8 acres. I can't remember the name of the road, but it was the 16 acres that got split in half. And so it had no technical access.
Oh yeah. No real access. Yeah.
Despite a physical real road that I had driven on a dozen times. And this just goes to further kind of, physically it was irrelevant. There's a real road. It may be a private road. In this case, there was a real road. I drove on it a bunch of times. I even walked the land a bunch of times with Stacy, with Jeremy, whatever. And then we're going to, I think I actually put in an offer, and you go to work and you immediately, well, there's no legal access. And I go, I don't really care. There's a road. And you go, no, it doesn't. It does matter. Like, it was part of an 8-acre parcel right in front of it. And when it got split, or that 16 acres had access from the main road. And when it got split, there was no access given. And there isn't even like a right of way and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, so what do we do? And your first response was, good news, landlocked land is illegal in North Carolina. And I guess I should explain that, because to me, that term is self-explanatory. But landlocked is your land is fully surrounded by land 365 and you have no road. So there you go. That is illegal. So no matter what, there has to be access given by either the state or I don't even know who actually, but there just has to be access. It's the law. So despite you saying that, here I sit and I didn't buy that land. So what were you attempting to do to try to get, and what were you looking up, and how did we spot that?
Yeah,
or you spot that, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, you'll look at the plat. If there's a plat of survey that shows the cut, and you'll look at the GIS for the county, the informational system, and you will look and see, where is this land? How do we get access? Is it direct access from a public thoroughfare, or is it on a private right of way? And yeah, your point is, someone who has a large tract and they subdivide it, they can't subdivide it in such a fashion that a property that they're going to end up selling to somebody else is completely landlocked. The problem is not that you will not eventually gain access, because it will be granted in some form or fashion. It's how quickly can it be established on the ground where that access is. and who's going to draft the right-of-way easement so that you can ingress, egress, regress in and off of that property.
And if memory serves, the property was owned by somebody who had passed, and it was like left to 3 kids. So it was like trying to get in touch with all 3 of them was very difficult. And then on my end, you had to get something drafted that everybody on that private road would sign. So it just kept droning on and on and on. And
That's
it was one of those processes where I was like, I don't know if the land is flawless enough to like keep doing that. So from a legal standpoint, it would have happened just by the pure fact that it legally had to. I think we left it because it was like, okay, this could take a day or 3 years, and we don't want to wait.
Correct. We would probably have been a recombination as a flag lot and gotten you access that way. But the other issue was, as you said, there was I believe, if I remember correctly, and I may not be, this was at the end of a private roadway, and there was so much frontage from all these other lots, and there was no private road maintenance agreement in place. So
that's also true. Yeah. It was literally just it was basically a gravel driveway that 8 people lived on either side.
Right.
That's basically what it was. Yeah. It wasn't, there was a power pole running down it, but there was like, it wasn't, there was no curb. It was definitely not plowed. It was a driveway. It was a gravel road. It was a farm road. Yeah. And then more recently, and I would say slightly more interesting, was that Ruth Street land, which now we can go ahead and completely talk about. So, a little while ago, we had bought just a house that we had found, and then we bought the house next to it at auction. And we have since completely gutted and completely redone, and we have happy tenants in both those houses. And you were vital in closing both of those. Or I guess the auction was, you still helped us at the auction because we had never done that before. But then my mom, actually, who's my business partner, shout out to the great and wonderful Beth, she got a letter in New York, of all places, that said, you own 3016 Ruth Street, which is accurate. I represent the people who own 3018 Ruth Street. Want to buy it. Obviously, it was much more articulate than that, but I'm paraphrasing. My mom sends me a picture. I go, that is some scam. That is nothing. I get that in text form. People text me, hey, can I buy Winburn Ave? Are you accepting a cash offer? Or they call me and they're not even, it's like an accent that I can't understand. I was like, that's not real. And I dismissed it. And I took a re-look at the text the next day, and I reread the letter, and I was like, oh, snap. I dismissed that too quick. They're not trying to buy 3016. They're trying to sell 3018. So to be clear, 3018 is forest. It's just exactly the same, super skinny, but super deep shotgun style tract of land that Ruth 14 and Ruth 16 are exactly the same. It's like, only 60 feet wide, but it's like 400 feet deep. You could do a whole nother house back there. And it's the same. So we now own 3 in a row. So we contact them, and to shorten the story a little bit, we say yes. And you go to work and you discover stuff that I've never even heard of. Now, let's be clear. Maybe a dozen properties. So the likelihood of me hearing every title fiasco in those 11, 12 properties is low. But still, you start coming back with red flag after red flag after red flag and sending emails to my mother and I, and we're like, okay, well, there's nobody we trust in the closing of land more than you. If you say there's a red flag, we're going to wait for you to keep digging and tell us what's up. So what did you find? Because they were unusual.
There had been, this is, if I'm remembering this property right, there were deeds from parent to child back to parent. I believe this is what it was, and there were tax liens. I'm trying to remember. I think this was this the tax foreclosure sale property? I'm trying to remember.
That's what we ended up doing.
Yeah. It was. It's funny. The commissioner had posted it, and these people were trying to sell it. It had already been posted for sale, and I guess they were trying to. I don't know what they were trying to do.
one could assume they were trying to sell it for more than they were about to get it auctioned for to pay off the money they owe to the government and walk away with hopefully 5-10 grand. That's what you would assume they were trying to do.
That would be the assumption.
Yeah, because they were trying to sell it for like 40-ish K.
Yeah. That was just a pulling the title, taking a look at the deed record, looking at the index of the grantor, and there were quite a few transactions of it back and forth, and there was a deed of trust. Actually, I believe there was the term factor. You owe money to somebody, and a factor will say, okay, you owe money to so and so. We'll lend you the money at relatively exorbitant amount. And when you get paid back, then we'll get paid back. So I believe there was a factor involved, and the factor I believe had not been paid, and it was pretty old. So that one got me to thinking, because it was within the enforcement period, and I'm like, I don't think that's been paid. But trying to get a hold of that entity, I mean, it was 2000 and early 2000s, if memory serves, or maybe even older than that. And that entity was no longer alive in that name. So being able to find that was going to be difficult, and that's when I saw that the commissioner, there was a tax commissioner sale, and I contacted their office and I said, "Are you selling this? Is this what you guys are selling?" And they indicated that it was going to go up for auction, and at that point, I believe I let you guys know that it was actually going on the block, and Beth came back and said, "Well, would we get it cheaper at auction?" I'm like, "Probably." Yeah, I mean, it's going to go at what the tax bills are.
We did, in fact, get it for much cheaper. Yeah, we were about to shell out, I believe it was either 35, 40, or 45K. I simply cannot remember, but it was agreed upon. We had given them like $2,500 in a deposit, which we did get back. So it's no harm, no foul. But I believe when it was all said and done, I think it was under 15K we got it for at the auction, but it was actually kind of funny. I go to the auction and there's like 40 people there. And the guy, he's like, "Okay, so I'm auctioning like 7 properties." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is going to be a shit show. Everybody's going to want this property that, it started at like $8 grand for this tract. If you're a builder, I mean, you clear it and it's a lot. Like, it's ready to go." I was like, this is going to suck. And sure enough, he's like, "Okay, I'm going over this." He goes over the 7 properties, and then he says, "Okay, we're going to start with the vacant lot at Ruth Street." And he walks around with the a piece of paper in his hand for all these 40 people to see. And he's like, "Okay," and he starts doing the blah 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 blah. And he's like, "Okay, and we're starting at 8,000 whatever blah, blah, and who wants it?" And I go, "I'll take it." And silence. Not one other person was there for that property, and he went, "Okay, anybody else?" And you could have heard a pen drop. And then everybody laughed, and he went, "Okay, once, twice, this guy's got it." And he said, "Pay the lady there." And I walked out, and everybody was laughing at me because they were all about to get in a bidding war for something else. Then, of course, for the last 8 weeks since then, I've had to go to the courthouse every Friday to redo an upset bid. Yeah. Because somebody, I don't know who, we kept going back and forth. The lady knew me by the last time. She was like, "Ruth Street, right?" I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, wait, let me guess. It's Robert? I was like, "Oh, that's my middle name. You're close." She's like, "I was so close." Like, she knew me. She had seen the same piece of paper over and over again.
500 incremental increase.
No, it's 7 now.
Is it 7?
It's like 7 or 750. Yeah. Okay. And you have to put,
I'm behind on my
it's changed. It's changed a little bit. Yeah, it's changed a little bit. But we got it. And we have no plans. We just literally didn't want.
Yeah, well, that's a super lien. That's a super lien, and they are amazing. I mean, that tax lien could have just been, for the last 2 or 3 years, it takes precedence over any deed of trust. It takes precedence.
Federal government takes precedence.
Actually, there was a case a few years back where the tax liens are given equal footing. But the IRS has to be notified of the sale. So NCDOR sold a property, did not notify the IRS. IRS got the property 2 months later, conveyed another deed, and so the question was who actually owned the property. And it turns out if you do not give the IRS their requisite statutory notice, North Carolina Department of Revenue, you're in second lien position on that property. You don't actually own it. The IRS owned it. So
Uncle Sam is the worst.
Yeah, that's more than one podcast. That's about 30.
Okay, so we'll have you back for the next one in a couple of months.
That'll require alcohol.
No, well, we got beer in the fridge. Yeah, we can do that. So I'd love to close this out with just asking you, you're obviously, as we've discussed, talented closing attorney. You're a homeowner yourself. You've done this a lot of times, and you've dealt with probably the majority of first-time homeowners, but obviously not first-time homeowners. You know, the career is vast. But focusing, if you will, for half a second on specifically first-time home buyers, you're not the first person that people get to. You know, you're actually one of the last people that a buyer would get to. But your experience to me is very interesting. So I wonder advice you would have either as a homeowner yourself, as a home buyer yourself, or as a closing attorney that you would have to give to a first-time home buyer that, you know, they wouldn't get.
The toughest question saved for last.
Yeah.
You seized on it earlier. It's hard to know what you don't know until you know a little bit. And first time home buying, first off, it is my pleasure. It is the greatest honor that I have. You can only, as a person, as a buyer, you can only do it for the first time once.
It's true.
And I love it. I absolutely love it because bright faces, eager to know what's going on. And I cannot I can't overemphasize how much joy that I get in that experience. But for them to get to my office, you're correct. I am way down the chain. And the hope is that they have a great agent, that they have an agent that's sort of given them the idea. Stacy's one of those.
Shout out to Stacy Sloan. We love Stacy.
Yeah. And I could throw a couple more in there, but for the sake of being loyal to those here, I'll leave it at that. But just to say that the agent does a lot toward preparing the client for this. And the agents that I really respect and trust the most are the ones that are almost in constant contact with the client. And they will tell them, when you go to the office, take your driver's license with you. They'll be the agents that say, don't do any other credit right now. If you're getting a loan, let's make sure. They'll be the ones that prepare the client. You're going to be in there for probably about an hour and a half. Now, if you want him to go faster or not cover stuff, you can ask him to, but he is not going to be upset at all if you ask a bunch of questions. He really likes this. He really enjoys educating you and training you a little bit in the process. He doesn't believe that the attorney's job should be shrouded in mystery. He doesn't think that what he does is so above your ability to understand and comprehend that he's not going to be upset if you ask a bunch of questions. As a matter of fact, he will welcome it, and I do.
So you're the opposite of a medical professional, is what you're telling me. Got it. Okay. Since they just speak Latin and go, "How dare you ask me a question? I am a surgeon."
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. But having a great agent on the front end, plus the important things like inspections, the stuff that an agent should do and can do, and really ethically should provide for the client. If they're doing their job, the client is prepared to come to me. But when they do, and the agent comes in the door, I also want to be clear about this. The agents, when they come to closings, and we're starting to allow agents back into closings, the COVID was a different thing.
Definitely.
I've had agents in the past come in and try to explain the legal process to the client in front of me. That's not going to be well tolerated because I don't believe in the unlicensed practice of law from people who pretend to be attorneys, or certainly not real estate agents. If you are an attorney and a real estate agent, that's fine, but pick your hat.
Right.
Pick your hat. If you're an agent,
that's not your job.
Right, and it's not. And I had a real estate. A mortgage broker. Then I honestly had to kind of fire them because he would come in and constantly try to explain legal documents. And I had to say in the closing once, I said, I really don't want you to talk again in this closing until I'm done with the documents. And then you can talk all you want to talk. But until I'm done explaining the documents to the client and answering their questions, I really don't want you explaining it because what you're doing is a disservice to the client because you're not explaining it right. And I had to tell him, after the closing of the door, I said, none of the things that you explained of the legal importance of this document was correct. Not one. Not one.
That's even the worst when you're just like giving bad advice. And he probably didn't even know he was giving bad advice. It's not like a malicious move where he's like, let me tell them the wrong thing. He's just misinformed. Are you the closing attorney for the buyer specifically, the seller specifically, or the house? Do you work with both?
Great question. Thank you for that. Actually, that probably should have been the one I put up on a tee at the very beginning. My client is the buyer. Okay. My client is the buyer. The lender believes that we represent them. And to a limited degree with respect to the accuracy of the documents, I might have some responsibility to them. When it comes to bottom line responsibility and liability for, mine is only the client. And the agents, Lord love them, they bring me business. I don't represent them. I represent the client.
And then the seller, does a seller even need a closing attorney, or just getting a check?
And I thought you weren't prepared for this podcast, Corbett. You're doing a fantastic job of putting your fingers on questions. The seller does not have to have an attorney. The buyer's attorney, under the North Carolina statute, under the North Carolina ethics opinions and the advisory opinions, has the ability to draft seller documents for the seller, a limited use for the buyer's attorney. I can draft documents for the seller all day long. I cannot answer specific legal questions with respect to things outside of the drafting of those documents. But the sellers in North Carolina typically do not come with an attorney. Their agent represents them to the agent's ability in that arena, and I will draft the seller's documents for them, and then we'll do the closing. If they need counsel, they'll have to, secure counsel of their own. I can't represent them. There is a way in North Carolina for both parties to agree to dual representation.
Have you done that?
No, because the seller typically only needs drafting of documents, and if they have questions that they call me about, most of the time they're not going to be the type of question that determines whether or not the deal goes through or not. But I will advise they seek counsel.
One could argue selling is a little easier than buying. Still, their
Correct.
process is both. I mean, there's a whole thing to go through.
Well, it becomes an issue. Let's say that you've put earnest money up and you put due diligence money up. Due diligence money's gone. The earnest money is in play. Let's say
so real quick, let's explain the difference between earnest money and due diligence money, because sometimes I even get them confused. So due diligence money is what?
The due diligence is for you to do your due diligence on the property, which means do your inspections, those things. You're paying for the right to do those things. Once the due diligence period is up and that money's gone the moment you write it and give it to the seller, that money is gone. But you have until the end of the due diligence period to terminate unilaterally. Buyer says, I don't want it. There's too much wrong with this property. I'm going to get my earnest money back. As long as they terminate before the expiration of the due diligence period, they can get their earnest money back. And in the old days, due diligence was, $200, $300, $500, and the earnest money was, $5,000. We went through a really crazy time where there wasn't even any earnest money. I mean, it was all due diligence.
And earnest is a deposit that's refundable.
That it can be refundable.
Okay.
We did closings on $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 homes that had $50,000 and $75,000 due diligence money during this crazy period.
Well, that's how you weed out people who aren't serious. I mean, with a price, that's a lot of money, yes, but that house is a lot of money. $700,000 house, that's a lot of house. So asking for $50,000 that is fully refundable, I don't know if that's that insane.
Oh,
that does weed out
due diligence.
Oh, I misheard. Sorry, not earnest.
Due diligence money.
$50,000 and it's gone if you change your mind.
I did a house with $100,000 due diligence, and I told the buyer at closing, well, you were locked into this the moment you went into contract. You could not walk away from $100,000. He's like, no, I had to buy it.
Who can walk away from $100,000? We're like a Saudi prince. I know. Not nobody can walk away from $100,000.
I think the house was close. Well, the house might have been over $1 million, but still, I don't know anyone that can walk away from that.
I don't know anybody either that can walk away from that and be whole and not file for bankruptcy. Yeah, earnest money. That again, when it was earnest, that makes sense. That just weeds out people who want to explore this life and then realize that they didn't get the mortgage approved or whatever. But
it's better to stay in mom and dad's basement than it is to
yeah. But earnest, due diligence. I mean, if you're doing due diligence for more than, in my opinion, you don't need $2,500. You don't need more than $2,500 to get every true inspection done. And I mean stuff you might not even do on your average sale. Obviously, you're going to get a home inspection, but I mean, you could, with that money, you could do a radon test, and you could do a well water test if you're on a well. I mean, you could do a lot of examinations with that money.
Well, hold on. That due diligence money goes to the seller. It's not going to the inspectors and stuff. That $2,500 you're giving to the seller just to give you the right to get on the property and to do your inspections.
Oh, and then you got to pay your inspections.
And then you got to pay for the inspections.
Ooh,
but that due diligence does get applied to your purchase price. I mean, you do get it back once you close.
Okay.
The purchase price is reduced by that. But
so if you go through with it, you don't lose any money.
That's correct.
Right. This is all really just a problem if you're backing out.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. All right. Well, make sure it's the right house.
Well, in this market, we went down to a point in time where we had less than 7 days worth of inventory. I think we're back now to 60 days. So this market's been, you know, a healthy market is probably 3 to 6 months of inventory. We went where you couldn't find a home, so people were doing crazy things because there was nothing to be had.
Yeah, I mean, the stories that I heard, if you didn't actually know the person, it was realty myth. And then you'd actually hear the story and they'd be like, no, dude, you don't understand. I went $50K above asking. Right. And they said, it's already been accepted and you were not the highest bid. I was like, $50K above asking? That's unheard of. He's like, I know. Yeah, and this is like more than one person, more than one house for the same price. I was like, okay, so I'm missing something.
Well, there was a story, one that actually made the paper in Durham. Somebody put put an open house listing up, open house sign. And they had 142 people go through the house. They had people lined up outside to walk through a house that just went up for an open house. I mean, we had a crazy time, a absolute crazy time.
Yeah, I'd sell my house, but where would I live?
Right. Well, what could you buy back?
I had nothing.
You know,
right. A trailer. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely nothing. Yeah, I got to build my house first. That's the plan. Yeah.
Well, you can do that. Most folks didn't have the luxury of saying, you know, I can go take my hammer and put my own house up. They unfortunately had to have something that was already built or
yes, obviously, like I am not everybody and nobody is anybody else. But yes, there are a vast majority of people who needed to go from wherever hell else to Raleigh, and they had to be here within 3 months because somebody had a job to take, right. And that job was going to literally put frickin' food on the table. And I'm not going to argue with anybody's ways of living. That's just how this real estate market went insane.
It did.
And rates are skyrocketing now. So it's just going all over the place, but rates go up and it doesn't seem to be slowing things down. Stacy says she's busier than ever.
Well, certain niches of it are still active. There's been a massive slowdown in it, which is why the inventory is crept up a little bit. It has slowed. The commercial side, though, I do commercial transactions as well. That's still going, you know, fairly well. But there's been a slow, and honestly, what we had was artificial. That wasn't a true market either. So the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah,
but we have slowed. I mean, if you talk to most professionals, it's slowed.
It's fluctuating back to a normal line. It was doing the crazy heart monitor up and down, and we're getting back to I know a flat line is bad in the medical heart monitor word, but for the sake of my analogy, we're killing the market back to normal. But the thing about normal markets and the triangle is that Venn diagram sometimes is two separate circles. Sometimes they simply don't overlap because the triangle is, I don't want to say that it's unique because like there are places with cities. We're not like the only place with a city, but what we are is 3 relatively sized cities all within 20 minutes of each other and like world-class hospital as well as 1 to 2 to even 3 depending on your definition of like world-class educational institutions. And then you also get to throw in RDU as an airport. Size-wise is small, but in terms of where you can go is not small. So you have the trifecta of a lot of.
Well, you have industry too.
And industry. Yeah, I didn't even mention industry and more industry coming. So it's just like, yeah, the market could slow in all of the rest of the country, and the triangle for some reason still is finding a way.
We're protected.
Yeah, it's a unique ecosystem inside the economy of America.
We are protected. Unfortunately, rates are national in origin, and so that is a somewhat of an equalizer. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
We're protected far more than most because of the factors that you mentioned, and that's been a great protection for this area for a really long time. And I hope we continue to do that, and hopefully rates will come back down a little bit in the next little bit to something that's more accurate. I mean, we were closing on properties that they weren't even covering the time value of money. I mean, money was being loaned at a rate that didn't even cover the cost of taking that money out of circulation, and it was an attempt to
in like the ones and the twos.
I mean, yeah. I mean, okay, yes, and I am sitting there with a 2.25 on my house. Of course I am, but
yeah. I mean, I'm very happy with 3.25. So I mean, like, it's everything is relative. Yeah.
Oh yeah, someone would stab you an eye for it now. And
it's like 7 right now, or 6.25 or something. I am having a lender on in a couple of weeks who, when we had our phone call of "this is my podcast, hi, nice to meet you," because I just kind of found her and was like, "Hey, I see you're a lender. Do you want?" And she was like, "Sure, why not?" And during that phone call, I was like, "Yeah, with rates, I mean, are you even working?" Like, half serious, half sarcastic. And she was like, "Oh, the rates are insane, but yeah, there's like 3 or 4 workarounds to rates." And I was like, "Oh my God, I need you on the podcast immediately." So I don't have the answer for what those 3 or 4 workarounds are, but when Morgan Rainin, I forget how to say her last name. When Morgan comes on the podcast, we'll make sure to get all that information from her, because the rates, as you just very importantly said, which I did not know, they are set nationally. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Well, I mean, it's all a trickle down. So the Fed does whatever the Fed does, and then you're gonna get that. There might be rates are a function of course the economy, but also the risk, the client's credit rating, et cetera. So those things are going to play a role in it as well. But the biggest one is what does money cost these banks, and then that's set at a national level. So we're always going to be subject to that. But again, in this area, we have the things that keep people employed, and being employed allows you to make that payment, and making that payment keeps the markets from us having a little mini Houston or a little mini Las Vegas, where they had their little blips and had whole tracts of properties devalued because of foreclosures. We haven't had that.
Yeah. Where can the listeners find you? Do you have Tri-City have a website?
We do. Tri-City Lawyers is the name, and it's my email address is kevin@tricitylawyers.pro. I'd love to see you on there. You'll not find a picture of me. You'll see my motorcycle though, which is
there we go. What are you riding these days?
Indian Chieftain is my baby girl. So that's.
I had this dream that unfortunately went from a dream to I had a team and it was a reality to now it's back to a dream of building a motorcycle to my size, because I'm too big for regular ones, or I'm too big for cruising ones because I don't like their style. So building a motorcycle to my size with a solid connection to a sidecar, and doing the whole thing electric and having batteries in both the sidecar and the motorcycle. And I put I put it up on Facebook out into the world in the, motorcycle EV build page. And this dude from Germany was like, "Well, I was the lead on the Lightyear project. You need help with the battery?" And I was like, "Yes." And then this guy from England was like, "Well, I'm a, top level student at a automotive design college. I have access to these programs that'll run stress tests, and I'd love to draw it for you for free just for the credit." And I was like, "You're hired." And then this dude in Virginia was like, "Well, I want to start this non-for-profit where I'm gonna build a glider that's electric, and I need to hone those skills, so I'd hone those skills on your project for free just to be able to film it." And so that led to a 4-way video call. And of course, one by one, they all had life stuff take them away from the project. And I'm not mechanically inclined enough when it's not woodworking to figure any of that out. So it went back to the dream category, but I did get my motorcycle license. So there you go. Have you test driven anything electric?
No, Live Wire is the one by Harley, which it accelerates like like your car out front.
Yeah.
I don't really want to go 0 to 80 in 1.2 seconds or something nuts.
You
I'm bad
say
enough on my bike.
that,
Yeah.
but I gotta say, I test drove the Zero brand out of California,
I've seen those.
San Francisco or whatever. They have at Raleigh at Team Power Sports on 70. A semi truck showed up with 20 of them for a demo weekend, and I gotta say, man, even with like following the rider that you have to follow and being tailed by the other safety rider, they would like stop us in the middle and change it to sport mode. And they're like, okay, there's a light ahead. We're going to wait. We're going to drive slow till I see it's green from a distance. And then we're opening up the throttle. And I was like, okay, let's go. And nobody knows that I have never ridden a bike above 10 miles an hour because I spent a weekend at Durham Tech getting my license to learn. And I've never been on a bike. That was, so I was like, all right, we're going to die or we're going to have a lot of fun. And here I sit with you today. I'm going to tell you, it was so much fun. Those bikes are incredible. I don't know how they're legal. I don't know how they're legal. Like, I want to go that fast, and it doesn't seem safe. I just don't get it.
It's not safe.
It's not safe. I mean, I drive that Tesla, and that's not safe. I've driven that thing at a volume that I won't disclose on here, or speed rather, and it is not safe. I don't understand how it's legally allowed to go that fast. And that's not the fastest one. That's the slowest one they make. They make that Model S plaid ludicrous, whatever. He named it after the Spaceballs because that's his favorite movie. And it's literally like you could hurt your neck if you're not like pressed against the. I've never driven one of those, but
you're just too young. I'm in my 60s. I don't want anything that's going to like wrap me around a pole. So.
Did Stacy tell you what happened when I? Oh, we'll end with this. Did Stacy tell you what happened when I drove her into Tesla?
No.
So since then I now warn people. I didn't tell her press your head back against the headrest. So she's just sitting kind of regularly, and I floor it from stopped. And literally, she was like, "Oh my God!" She was like, she was fine, but she was like, "I got a baby whiplash in my neck from the acceleration because she's just simply not used to that." She drives a Jeep.
I'm gonna call Stacy on my way home today and put her in touch with the personal injury attorney I know.
Bro, that's really not. Yes. And I said it on the podcast. Now there's legal record in front of a lawyer. Okay, so the Orange Hammer. This has been our last episode. It was a fun and short ride, but thanks. You can all yell at Kevin when you don't hire him to be your closing attorney now.
Tongue in cheek.
In all seriousness, this was really awesome. I really appreciate. I know that myself and hopefully some listeners learned some things, and that, they think about even though you're at the end of the process, there's a reason that you're kind of the last, guardian before it's released, because you really are checking vital, important stuff that people don't think about, because people only care about the house itself. They don't care about that piece of paper. And I really appreciate you diving into that. And maybe we'll get some beers and have that second podcast. I think that'd be a good move.
If we're gonna rag on the IRS, I'm in.
Okay. Well, we will call that podcast Beer and Taxes.
And death.
Beer, taxes, death. There we go. The only things that remain. All right, Kevin, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Corbin. Thank you.
All right, bye, everybody.